been a while, Dave, with Dave Powell. I can't even remember what the show's called now that we sort of do together. But it's about football finance.
It's about football.
And as ever, we've just done our annual survey again. And as ever, there was a clamour for more on football finance stuff because people are interested in it. And money matters. Maybe that's what the show's called. Who remembers?
Who even knows? We'll find out when it comes out.
But what we do is talk about the finances around the game. And in particular today, we're going to talk about the finances around Liverpool Football Club because the club have put out their annual report. And before we sort of get into it, I think it is important to nail down what period this is actually for, because people do get confused. I think not unreasonably because there's a time lag. And so this captures a very specific amount of time, and they're almost out of date as soon as they're printed. But when people are talking, for example, saying things like, well, Arne Slot's earning less than Jurgen Klopp, and that should be a factor, and it is worth noting. So what specific period is this for?
So this covers the financial year from 2023 to 24, and Liverpool's year end is end of May, and there's only two other teams that have year end of May, which is Arsenal and Wolves, I think. So it just covers that period where Liverpool were in the Europa League last year, up to that whole period. So it does include also the return to kind of qualification to the Champions League for this year, which may has a knock-on impact in terms of the wage bill because potential bonuses which arise from that. So, but yeah, it's there are weird things accounts, and I know we've talked about this previously, where there is a snapshot in time, and Liverpool's actual situation is kind of markedly different in the here and now in the current financial year, which runs to the end of this May. So, but yeah, what it did do is highlight the reliance that not just Liverpool but all clubs have on Champions League qualification.
Yeah, and that's it for me. It's record losses, which sounds awful, but it is factually correct. It's record losses for Liverpool. It seems like a level of loss that they feel reasonably comfortable with, not least because they know that the season after we're in the Champions League, and they know by the time that it come out that we're not just in the Champions League but performing well in it. And so do you sense that that's why there's a level of comfort with this sort of loss, because they think, well, it shows the importance of being it, but most clubs, unless you're really up against it, most clubs can tolerate it for a year?
Yeah, because it can be explained away.
Yeah.
The biggest decline was attributed to a loss of broadcast revenue, which, I mean, the Champions League, yes, it delivers its prize money and qualification funds for getting through, but you are entitled to a big wedge in the market pool, the TV market pool, and Liverpool's kind of coefficients and everything plays very strongly into that. It's worked out a different way from this current Champions League year, which means that Liverpool will probably break through the 700 million barrier in terms of revenue for this current financial year, I'd imagine, based on Champions League success. But the biggest dip was broadcast revenue, and that was all attributed to the fact that they didn't have Champions League revenue. They had Europa League revenue, which is millions less, tens of millions less. So that's impactful. But also it came at a time when the wage bill rose because of some additions. I know there were some players left, but also there was some of those bonuses which were triggered kind of fell into that financial year, which, I mean, because qualification for the Champions League is, I mean, FSG have always heavily incentivized contracts. So whether it be winning the Premier League, winning the Champions League, qualification for the Champions League, they know that if they incentivize contracts and they have to pay, yes, but it's usually in line with you will get more money, from those things happening anyway. So, but yeah, it just underscored the level of importance of the Champions League. But I think they would be more concerned if there were other key revenue pillars which were declining, but they posted record commercial revenues of 308 million, I think. Match day revenue was up past 100 million for the first time ever because of the completion of the Anfield Road stand. A lot of administrative costs have gone up. That's the case across the board for all clubs, It's a case in my house with Eon, So my electricity bill has gone up again as well, but probably not by as much as Liverpool's. And that said, the increase in costs came at a time when you build it, when you redevelop a stadium or you do significant work on a stadium to revamp it. Yes, it generates revenue further on down the line, but also carries increased cost. Not just the build of it and how you finance it, but also everything from utilities to staffings, all sorts, that carries a lot more cost. Same for commercial income, so there's a cost of sale, so in order to sell more stuff, you have to produce more stuff, you have to create more points of retail, so they open new stores up in Dublin. So there's all this extra cost baked in order to get this increased cost. So the costs have increased significantly. But this is a season which you can just look at, we didn't qualify for the Champions League, and you can explain away pretty much most of the losses there. As a result of that.
I want to pick up on a few things you've introduced there, Dave. Let's start with the wage bill, because that's been maybe the most contentious issue that I've sort of seen online, and people were wrongly, it seems, expected it to go down. It hasn't. The reasons for that you've explained. It's sort of Champions League qualification, but when I look at that, I think, well, wouldn't therefore then you've expected it to have gone down the year before, because we didn't qualify for the Champions League, so those bonuses wouldn't be there. So. But it has sort of gone up year on year, really, and I think that's where, as football fans, we're a little bit surprised, because we're seeing these high earners go in, we're seeing sort of people move on, and the players who are coming in without having, seeing everyone's wage slip, it doesn't sort of look like that. And then if the year before the team hadn't qualified for the Champions League, like wouldn't have that been accounted for then?
No, I mean, it's also worth noting the player salaries in the main have also increased across the board. So what was kind of value 2 years ago is now significantly increased. So the new earners would have been earning, and I know that lots was made about kind of Thiago leaving and being on big wages, etc. But so too the players that arrived were on big wages. So I mean, qualification. I mean, as I mentioned before, the incentivization of contracts is something which costs a considerable amount more money for FSG, but they also, they factor in that they're going to get that money back, and 3 or 4-fold further on down the line through prize money, etc. But what was the wage bill increase? Something like it was up 20 odd million, maybe.
Yeah, I haven't got it. I'm just sort of having a little bit.
Off my head.
Look for that now.
Maybe a little bit more.
Numbers, sorry. 15. Yeah. So it was 372 and now 386. So yeah. So 15 million. Yeah.
So kind of through you've got contract renewals, people get just on new deals. So you've got breakthrough players on new deals who are getting significantly more income than they were, through to bonuses. They also won the League Cup as well. And while that doesn't carry a huge amount of financial benefit for the football club in terms of prize money, for winning the Carabao Cup you get 100 grand prize money. It's of no value to a club the size of Liverpool really financially. The biggest money comes from being able to, if you get home games, because you're going to get sellouts, and also the value that you get to put on players who are fringe players, so like Queven Keller and stuff like that, who play more in those cup competitions and hold value. But it does carry brand value, which means if you win silverware, you tend to get bonuses. So they've done that and qualified for the Champions League and finished, based upon final positions, all sorts, all this type of thing is factored in. But I think there was an underselling of how much the players coming in are on during the summer. It was kind of we're replacing Thiago, or Joe Matip's leaving, but we're replacing him with Alexis McAllister on 45 grand a week or something. He's not, he's in lots. It's a significant rise, and given the fact they added a significant amount of players over the summer in kind of one fell swoop. They didn't spend an enormous amount on transfer fees, yes, but they spent a significant amount on wage outlays. So I kind of think it almost offset it. I think they probably would have been at the level of equilibrium had they not kicked in any bonuses for the following year. But I just think it's kind of, in the statement themselves, the club explained it away as we added, these amount of players during the transfer window. These players left. We had contract renewals for 11. A lot of those young players, yes. Some of them were significant rises on what they had.
Yeah.
Largely you can kind of explain away the difference.
The other conspiracy theory is
conspiracy theories, love them.
Is around specifically John Henry getting a yacht.
Yeah.
But
got a few of those.
Often, so FSG have said that they've never took anybody out of the club.
Yeah.
People do not believe them. And so there's maybe suggestion that some of these wages are going to John Henry. I don't know as much about finance for you, but I would imagine if John Henry wanted to pay himself, this would be an appalling way to do it.
Yeah, he doesn't need to pay himself.
But even if he did need to, like, this is like he doesn't want to start paying UK tax and stuff like that. Like they do it in the way that the Glazers do it, which is dividends and stuff like that, which wouldn't be under wages.
They could be very open about taking money out of the club. The Glazers do, So if anything, remuneration of directors at Liverpool went down in the most recent financial year from about 2.7 to 2.1. So, the highest paid director at Liverpool was Billy Hogan. But you look at the counterpart that would be at Spurs, Daniel Levy's on 6 million plus. Billy Hogan's not on that. Conspiracy theories are part and parcel of football, particularly when it comes to team ownership, etc. So.
But it's really hard to imagine the club.
There would be a very easy way for them to just take money out of the club, and that would just be through dividends.
Yeah.
They don't. The whole investment model of Fenway Sports Group is to accrete value over time. It's an investment portfolio. That's what it is. It's not there it's not a piggy bank. They have other elements of the business which earn money. So like Fenway Sports Management and all, and real estate, all these other things. These assets, because they are. I was on our own Blood Red show the other day talking about how, yes, it seems very crass to call these assets, but there's not I don't think there's an ownership group in world football that just, has, is so emotionally involved and attached. I just think this is all kind of fairly cold business-like dealings, except Liverpool's are done fairly transparently, and this is an investment play, so Liverpool's value increases over time. And when they come to exit, that's when everyone gets their value. There's nothing to be gained really from John Henry trying to go through the UK tax system to kind of put himself down as taking someone's wages out the payroll. It's just it's kind of nonsensical. So, but I get that it's an exciting theory to put out there. But I think he has a yacht. Maybe he wishes to purchase another one. I don't know, but. I don't think that's the way he's going to go about it. I think he's got access to a decent line of credit.
Well, I can't imagine so either. But people will either believe us or they won't. And I think they probably made up the mind on that. So let's get back into the realms of what we can actually see. And where the club's doing really well is the commercial deals, and you mentioned that earlier. It has to be said, pretty impressive that they managed to increase those. It's a competitive space, but Liverpool do seem to have got in not just a higher sort of income level, but also a higher status of brands that they seem to be working with now, and for that they deserve credit, in my opinion.
Definitely. So, you and I speak to similar people at Liverpool. It's and we've seen what the foundation does and everything. It can be easy to ignore the impact that a good foundation has on the ability for you to leverage commercial deals. There's a load of good football teams across kind of England and Europe. That could command big exposure. Liverpool, of course, chiefly among those. But you have to, more and more now, and from some commercial directors I've spoken to, is there has to be a return on investment. You have to demonstrate these things have an impact beyond just front of shirt exposure and some kind of snazzy LED boards around the stadium. There has to be much more to it. So Liverpool has a really strong foundation, which falls into the need for big brands to have kind of a community ethos that runs through. A lot of the big brands that have associated themselves with Liverpool have done a lot with the foundation that kind of follows through. Same for the women's team. There is that kind of line which runs from the men's team to the women's team. So it's also reputable. It doesn't fall into crisis often. It doesn't, European Super League aside, and the odd faux pas with ticket rises, create much reputational risk for big brands, which is why they get big brands aligned with themselves. So you look at some of the ones they got this past financial year, so UPS, Peloton, Google Pixel, all big brands. And they're all so brands that the club bring in to not just give them commercial benefit, but also it's kind of like a contra deal whereby they'll engage in using their technology or what they do, how to better the football club. So Peloton has a fitness impact for the club's training base at they got at Kirkby and
at Melwood.
Melwood, yeah. So and then you've got UPS helps with the kind of delivery globally of Reds merchandise and stuff like that.
I know they use SG Johnson a lot on the environmental stuff as well.
Yeah, and then there's a big thing, the environmental play with that. So you've got all the kind of, there's big play to try and make Liverpool the kind of most sustainable football club in terms of economics, in terms of environmental impact in the kind of globally, really. And then you've got Google Pixel and the kind of technologies integrated in what they do at Anfield. So all these things are interconnected, and brands like all that. They don't just want to give you money, here's a name, whatever. You have to have a return on investment and give something back, kind of be, demonstrate that there is a value there. And that's clubs have a real duty to do that now. And you see, I think sometimes you can see the ability of clubs to do that by the strength of their corporate partners. So how many kind of betting firms have Liverpool had, which have great exposure across the brand? Not many, you've got, cryptocurrency firms are still seen as quite volatile. The club explored the market with that a couple of years ago when they were looking at Standard Chartered's potential replacement. Ended up staying with Standard Chartered, obviously. But there was some element of reputational risk around that. They dipped their toe into the NFT world. That caused a great furore. He didn't get much back in it, and they've not gone back in since. So I think it should be kind of instructive as to where they are and how brands see them. So they are a blue chip brand, which blue chip brands want to partner with. So, and for Liverpool, that just means that commercial revenues are only going to go one way. I mean, they've opened up offices in the past few years in Asia. They've got one in New York, which and the kind of at this moment in time, if you've not got a foothold in New York, strong one heading into 2026 and the World Cup and the what's going to come from that, then you're really missing a trick, and there isn't many who are out there at the moment. So I think if you look at some of the sponsorships that their rivals have got compared to what they've got, so look at Chelsea, kind of went with having no sponsor on the front of the shirt because they couldn't get the value they felt they wanted for the shirt sponsorship. So rather than taking a lesser fee and hobbling themselves in the future, when they come to renegotiate, they've decided to try and test the market again next summer. So very interesting to see how it plays out for some rivals. But for Liverpool, the longevity of sponsorships is also, the sponsorship retention is as important as kind of bringing on board new business. If you look at some of the long-term deals that Liverpool have got, Carlsberg, Coca-Cola, etc. These are all signs of a business which is in rude health, which people want to do business with, and that's just going to continue. They've had more recently. They've had Japan Air and Husqvarna, and these are all big brands. And if the Japan Air link comes out, they'll probably got to Asia this summer as part of that. So, and I imagine them probably mowing their lawns with Husqvarna mowers. So, it's a strong commercial operation run by very impressive people, really, who've got strong track records in delivering success. I know they made some changes at the top. So Kate Theobald's now in charge of kind of the global commercial output there, same as Ben Latty, who's now director of it. So they've got really strong leadership team, and that commercial revenue is only going to increase. And if they win the Premier League, which looks a strong bet, and they do well in the Champions League, which also looks like it could be on the cards, then they'll be able to leverage that to an even greater extent, and the next few years are going to be quite rosy for them.
Where it's slightly less rosy is probably more around costs. So you mentioned it before briefly about operational costs sort of have gone up. It's a lot more expensive to put on any event now, and these football games aren't an event. So we've seen how much concert tickets have risen, and we've seen how much it's getting harder and harder for bands to tour, and that's because everything's sort of more expensive. And Liverpool, just because they have a set home, aren't immune from that. It's getting more and more expensive to put these games on, and there's been discussions and one argument, I think, over ticket prices. Liverpool have frozen ticket prices next season, which I think is brilliant for supporters, and that's why you have to be sort of positive around these commercial agreements, I think, because these costs need to be swallowed. And so if Liverpool keep ticket prices the same and everything else goes up, they make less money per game from hosting events at Anfield. And obviously there's ways they could try and claw it back around hospitality sort of and things like that. But generally speaking, if ticket prices stay the same and costs go up, then they make less per game. And they're aware of that, and they're making decisions accordingly.
Yeah, I think against the backdrop of what we've seen across the Premier League, a lot of clubs have increased prices. I mean, if you look at last year, was it Forest went up by 25%?
I think the worst is the concessions and stuff like that, and the clubs who are doing away with that. I think is it's appalling, but it is happening.
It is, it's happened at Manchester United, and it's deeply concerning as to a wider theme across the game, because eventually we're just going to get to a point where we're pricing people out of being able to go and watch Premier League football. But I think it is to be applauded. I'm not in the business of backslapping billionaires, etc. But as a football club, it's a football club decision.
Yeah.
And I think Liverpool does, and I think the ownership group does understand this. I know some people might disagree that there has to be a level of different approach from Liverpool than there is from most other football clubs. Has more of a social conscience, and there are wider issues at play around the decisions you make around increasing ticket prices, etc. So, but that, as you said, that cost has to be swallowed somewhere. So it's easier to swallow it when you've posted record commercial revenues. They probably could have made the excuse of raising it a couple of percentage points because they had a season with no Champions League and they made a record loss. But I think they've probably seen that would not play well, and also they know that they've got a strong financial year to come back. So I think it speaks to the future financial health of the football club, but also the need for them to keep on driving revenues forward. Now, I've said lots of times about broadcast revenues. That's going to start flattening and then declining. So clubs have to find ways to earn money elsewhere. Now, they're satisfying greater demand with the Anfield Road redevelopment capacity is up to 61,000 plus, which is a great thing. They managed to find, huge acts now to come and play Anfield every summer, which delivers 12 to 15 million pound a year. Pre-season tours are back, which is not just this year, but I know it's been the past couple of years, but that wasn't a given for 2 years. So and clubs were still dealing with the fallout for until maybe 18 months ago of COVID. So we're now in a position where everything's back and everything's moving forward and the club's successful. So I think the optics would have been bad for Liverpool to increase ticket prices. But as it happens, they have actually come out as one of the only few clubs that are really playing ball with this. And that's, and it helps when you have a strong supporters group, representation at board level where you can have meaningful discussion. I think what we see at Manchester United is kind of the antithesis of what probably seen at Liverpool. This is that's like that they had taken some kind of callous decisions around managing the business because yes, they have to, because they realise they no longer get competitive success to a degree that they can rely on that. And they're budgeting for Europa League football for the next 7 or 8 years, read the other day, which seems appropriate. I think Europa League football is probably a stretch.
Well, maybe next year, unless they win it.
Yeah. I'd be more concerned about budgeting for Carabao Cup action, but it's no club is immune to financial hardship, but Manchester United have kind of traded off the back of being in Manchester United, whereas Liverpool haven't really. Liverpool have built up from a brand in the early 2010s, which had kind of lost its lustre a little globally, I think. Still had obviously huge relevance in the UK, but I think globally they probably started to fall behind some of their rivals. But I think over the course of the past 15 years, that has completely turned around. And yeah, I think it's been applauded that season ticket price has been frozen. If anything, they're always too high anyway. We're always going to say that. But I think in the current climate, when things are so expensive for people, I think it was kind of an act of goodwill, I think, to kind of keep things the same, even though they've got their own cost increases. But over time, they've got to find a way to bear those cost increases. Otherwise, we are going to see ticket prices rise because wages aren't going to go down.
Yeah.
And then you start looking at, does that impact how much they spend on transfers? Or, so there's always some way that they're going to have to make that pay. It won't just be through making a loss.
Player sales is an interesting one as well, because that's somewhere where Liverpool have fell behind a little bit. It doesn't seem like, I wouldn't say it's deliberate, but there's a lot of players who've been allowed to go on free. And you know, since the the wild days of £140 million or whatever it is for Phil Coutinho, which really helped fund, it seems since then that Liverpool have maybe slipped behind some other clubs. Now that might change in the summer. There might be a couple of players that Arne Slot doesn't fancy who he could get sort of decent money for. So, like with a lot of things, you only need one sort of good summer to. But is that interesting to you that Liverpool haven't maybe getting as much in player sales as they have been? You know, certainly pre-COVID, if you like.
I think the biggest teams that have succeeded with it are Chelsea and Man City. Chelsea's significantly, they have this conveyor belt of talent. I think what Liverpool do need to be better at is getting some of their real talent out on and good loans to really raise value and raise profile and see that as kind of a cost of business, really. It's not all these players are going to break through. You're always going to need a squad of players that can knock on the door, but you can't just allow them to be doing that for too long. You know, then you kind of lose their value. So you've still got, like, you know, you think about the likes of Nat Phillips and people like that. You know, it's a long time to be spent in the system and lose your value. And really, by the time players are 22, and if they're not really going to be meaningfully knocking on the door to get in the first team, they should have already had strong experience. And I think more and more key is having that experience outside of the UK. I think, you know, going on loan to French divisions or in Germany, etc., I think is more kind of meaningful in terms of value creation, because largely you're going to be looking at selling these players to Europe, because, you know, unless you're looking at, you know, clubs in the Premier League who look to try and acquire players, fringe players, but more and more now, smaller clubs in the Premier League are starting to look towards Europe and picking off top talent, you know, so there's no one wants to be taking anyone's feeder players anymore, you know, so, but they need to be doing more of getting exposure and minutes for their players in a strong way so they can build up their own value. That's why European competition is always really important as well, not just for the prize money aspect of it, it's to allow players to play at a good level and to be able to kind of grow in value and stature. I mean, I mentioned Kelleher before. Him being able to get strong minutes in kind of domestic cup competitions and in Europe allowed him to be in a good position to take on the mantle when Alisson was injured, and provided some kind of value around him. I mean, I imagine this summer's going to be question marks over whether he'll stay or go. You imagine that, you know, the latter might be the course of action there. But in order to be player trading is the key thing. And also Liverpool, when they don't get many misses in the transfer market, you're not moving on players at the same speed as some clubs. So, you know, Chelsea have already moved on players that they signed under the Bowley and Igbali era, you know. So that speaks volumes as to where their strategy's at. So I think we'll start to see a change over the next couple of years. I do think if they acquire this second club under this multi-club organisation model, that might start to see the wheels turn a little bit in terms of getting more players out through the system. I'm also bringing more players into the system and that Liverpool eventually sell. But also you don't want a creaking system and just become a farm for players. I don't think that's the appropriate way of doing things. Chelsea have kind of milked that now. They had themselves in a great position, and that wasn't because of the new ownership that Chelsea have themselves in a great position. It was because that was over a period of time that was built up. The problem they have now is they've acquired all this talent and there is no space really for breakthrough players, and which means their player trading will dry up, and what they'll end up doing is just trading players which they've already acquired and getting a minimal return on that.
Just finally on the future then, and by future I mean the summer, it's going to be interesting summer for Liverpool. You know, whatever happens, as Liverpool supporters hoping for maybe, well, at least domestic and maybe even European glory. But, you know, as we mentioned before, there's maybe one or two players that the manager's not quite sure about. There's the contract situation that's still not been resolved. Do you see a decent wiggle room there in terms of for Liverpool to spend if they need to? And, you know, it's not just PSR anymore. They've got to worry about wages to turn over for Europe and things like that. There's 2 or 3 different types of rules all existing at the same time. If Liverpool do lose Mo Salah and do lose Virgil van Dijk and need to have a bit of a spending spree this summer, do you see there being room to do that?
Yeah, I mean, Liverpool have given one of 4 or 5 teams in the Premier League that can make meaningful additions in the summer. Spurs, Man City as well, obviously. Arsenal, but it's the thing with losing someone like Salah, which I know they love the whole Moneyball thing, but he's a player you can't recreate in the aggregate, as they say, like in the Moneyball method. You just can't. So I think there'll be an acknowledgement at some stage that that's the money they're going to have to pay.
Yeah.
Same for Van Dijk, because I think they were probably betting on both of those players seeing a decline, and it would have been easier to kind of pacify the supporters and make that decision and bring in younger players. Because in terms of the model, I think they don't fit the age profile. However, they're not of the bottle, as Jose Mourinho would say. The Trent one probably a little bit different, because you wonder that may be a decision motivated by his willingness to maybe try his hand somewhere else. So that's different. But in terms of the summer and wriggle room, there is plenty of it. They've got cash flow strong. They have room in the wage bill to grow more, because they're going to they're going to be pulling in more revenue. But they don't like tying themselves to something too big for too long, because what it means to them is what happens if the success drops off. You're still going to pay the bill somewhere. So I don't see wholesale changes. I think probably they'll go in the market for 2 decent size fees, and maybe one or two, maybe one around the edge. Similar to what they did with the whole Gravenberch deal was kind of under the radar stuff, really. What did they pay for him? 35, and that's kind of there's Bournemouth and Wolves would happily pay 35 million players this summer. So it depends what the market does as well, and the willingness of some clubs to sell means that it might actually be a buyer's window, because we've still got PSR for this following year, which clubs weren't really anticipating. The reason that's been held up, the only reason that's happened is because clubs don't want to vote on the associated party transaction rules because of the Man City Premier League legal case. So that's going to be in situ for next season as well, which will rumble on for the following year in terms of potential punishment. So I think some clubs might be mindful of maybe cashing in on some of their top stars earlier. Newcastle will have less appetite to have to do that now, because they've started to turn a corner and they've moved into a new 3-year cycle. Yeah, and so I think the need for them to sell someone like Alexander Isak is less. Same for them. The need to sell someone like Anthony Gordon is less, but I still think there's deals to be done for players like that. Europe, I think a lot of clubs will focus on France, because the French TV market is in the toilet. A lot of clubs facing real financial hardship, players available for fraction of their original cost, and I think that's where some clubs might try and find some value. But for Liverpool, they've got room to manoeuvre, and that's always been the case. I think they've always, if there's a deal to be done, they can do it. But maybe sometimes they, you didn't. FSG are very divisive. I understand that, appreciate that, and I think there are times when they should have been stronger and been more forceful and from a position of strength, domestically, internationally on the pitch, and done more. But I think this time round, because it's a new manager who will want to bring in some players to stamp his own identity. It's already his team. Yes, Jurgen Klopp put the pieces together, but this is, you don't want to take anything away from what is phenomenal achievement from Arne Slot to get these players kind of all singing the same tune. So, but I do think he'll want to make some kind of Arne Slot signings this summer, and I'd be interested to see what they'd be. I don't think he'll lean heavily on the Dutch market, because I think Erik ten Hag probably could have done with taking his hands off the transfer wheel at Manchester United and someone else telling him, actually, some of these players aren't up to it. But some players who come from Holland are absolutely up to it, So I wonder what markets they're going to go into. I wonder what the profile of players is going to look like. I think it'll be much younger again if they're going to keep Salah and Van Dijk, etc. So, but I think it'll just be about kind of keeping the age profile down. So you got Andy Robertson as well. So he seems like the most obvious position whereby they may look to try and do something there and take some of the strain off Andy Robertson, because that's a hell of a stint he's done over the past few years. But the Kirkes links remain. But buying someone from the Premier League is expensive.
Yeah.
And Bournemouth now are kind of flying. They've got money, and they won't be kind of doing any deal on the cheap. So anyone that's kind of staying within the realms of the Premier League is going to be very, very expensive.
Just before we let you go, Dave, just in terms of looking a bit wider outside of Liverpool and other Premier League clubs, you mentioned there the Manchester United ongoing situation. The losses that they're posting are sort of quite eye-watering. The way that they're dealing with it looks quite eye-watering as well, so that's an interesting one. Last week was the Football Finance Summit, which we missed this year, but I'm sure you've seen Todd Bowley, who had plenty to say about what a good job he was doing. He's marking his own work, and he's given himself an A+. So what are you making of the Premier League general at the moment? There's obviously the ongoing Manchester City situation as well. What stories are grabbing you at the moment in the Premier League?
I think it's the Chelsea thing is... It's still crazy to me because they expected to be in Champions League by now. Looks at a stretch like they're probably not going to do it this year unless they have a turnaround in form. And that's not what was expected of this. It's not any part of the plan.
Certainly not to finish below Nottingham Forest.
No, and that's just it. So I don't think we're going to see any real changing of the guard in terms of a hierarchy. I think United are set in for a long period of misery still, and it takes a long time to bring about a change in culture and success, but you also need money to do it. When Liverpool came in, they invested a lot in when FSG came in, they invested a lot in the whole data thing and kind of creating a uniform way of doing things from academy to first team. It took a while to pay off that, and then they had to find a manager who was aligned with what they did, and they realised that was the key in terms of the manager should inspire and coach, but also it shouldn't be the end of days when a manager leaves, which has been the case at Manchester United. Alex Ferguson left, and they've still not recovered.
Yeah.
2013. That's 12 years ago.
Yeah.
And Liverpool's has been seamless because they had a strategy in place. Everyone's chasing, trying to put together a strategy and think it happens very quickly. It doesn't. It takes time. Arsenal's took time. They had to take a leap of faith with Arteta. They had to spend a lot of time outside of the Champions League, which affected their revenue significantly. Now they're back in it. They're earning good money, and they are very much on the cusp of surpassing Manchester United. Just as they're going to get left in dust very quickly because Liverpool are going to push past the 700 million mark. I'm sure of it for revenue this year.
Yeah.
Probably go back to being in the black. And plenty to look forward to, and they've already done their stadium redevelopment at a low cost of borrowing, really. Manchester United still need to build a new stadium. Cost of capital's very high, debt's not cheap, and there's lots of questions about timescale. So I think we are at a period where it's kind of a changing of the guard, really. The major players will stay in Liverpool, Manchester City, Arsenal. I think Spurs are going to be an interesting one. I think they've got so much room. If they get it right with a structure and a manager, they've got lots of room to grow. Same for Arsenal, really. Manchester City, I'd be interested to see if they miss out on the Champions League this year. That could be really interesting to what next year looks like. Manchester United are going to be a long time out of the conversation.
It's very sad, very, very sad to hear.
Watch them make Champions League next year.
I don't think so. We didn't even do the Blues, brand new stadium.
Making Champions League with Liam Delap up front next year. That's what they'll be doing.
A huge thanks to you had that. Huge thanks to Dave. Which ones we can? I'll go for this one. Huge thanks to Dave for coming in. I think the show was called Money Matters. I think that's what we went for.
I don't think it is.
Money Talks. That's it. Money Talks.
It's been a while.
Yeah, it has been a while. But Dave's brilliance remains. I'm still a bumbling idiot as ever. I hope you've enjoyed that. We'll be back in a shorter space of time than what that was.